Welcome to the chaos sector. Going back to the screenshot, I know it's frustrating, but there are a few things that stick out. Those headlights almost look placed onto that vehicle, especially the right headlight. That doesn't look normal. That headlight's glare would not be as precise or as well visible as the left headlight, which is completely seen based on the left side of the vehicle, completely visible. You understand? The edges of the glare are too precise, as opposed to, well, just being a bright glare. It looks like the left headlight was copied and pasted onto the right side. That's why they appear identical, despite the right headlight not being completely visible. It won't have the same visibility or glare as the left headlight. What does all this mean? It means, for one, it's obviously edited. But the question is, why was it edited? Someone left a post in suggesting the vehicle almost appears to be driving backwards, or the vehicle was parked, and someone was driving by and took a photo of the vehicle. And that's why it appears so distorted. Possible. Some have even suggested the vehicle doesn't actually have tires, or it's on a flatbed. Once again, the camera. That camera is also smudged. Now, how is this possible? It's like the camera on one hand is a part of the cell phone or tablet, but it also would appear to somehow be, get this, on the window. Some claim exist here. A camera on a window. Wow. The reason it appears that way is because the camera, which is a physical object and not a non-physical object of the video, is smudged to the point it's physically transparent through the surveillance footage. This is a mess. Steaming cow dung. Also, the fingers to the right side are literally transparent, as the surveillance footage is seen through the fingers. Physically impossible. The only way that is possible is that it's not. Because if you say it's someone holding the phone and everything else is a combination of reflections and the actual surveillance, you can't correct the obvious visual and physical impossibility of the phone's camera being transparent. To the point it's not even physically a part of the phone, it's a part of. I mean, what the? People keep trying to rationalize this nonsense, and it just magnifies the absurdity displayed. Someone states, the reason you see the phone in the photo is because you're seeing the reflection of the phone in the monitor. This is what should be displayed. This is the back of a tablet, as you see. The camera is in the top left corner. Okay, so far so good. Now we place glass over the tablet. Okay, so far so good. This represents the window that is casting the reflection. Next, we place the same surveillance screenshot into this example. As you see, no matter what you do or how you do it, the camera of the tablet does not lose its physical properties. It doesn't become transparent or simply looks detached from the device it's a part of. Did we really have to do this? A reflection doesn't distort the physical properties of the device, nor the fingers holding that device. And if you claim the surveillance is actually being displayed by the reflection of the monitor on the opposite side, then it would be more transparent than everything else in the screenshot. Listen, let's be honest here. The entire surveillance footage is one big cutout of the actual surveillance from the monitor. It's not a reflection of anything. It's an overlay of a photo taken of the surveillance and just placed over a cell phone or tablet, which itself is physically compromised due to the camera and fingers being transparent. Here's another example. Let's pretend this is a vehicle captured by a surveillance camera, okay? So far, so good. They took a screenshot of that surveillance on the monitor, then placed an overlay over the back of the tablet that perhaps took the screenshot from the monitor. Yep, sounds crazy because it is. And if you claim, no, that's not what happened, then please explain how the reflection, which would be apparently the surveillance, is behind the tablet's camera. It would be in front of the camera, as it's a reflection from the other side. Something is not physically present in this screenshot, and based on the camera's position, it appears the camera is not physically a part of this screenshot. Well, to be honest, the only thing that is physically original is in fact the device, excluding the camera. Yeah, I know it's wacky. The surveillance bleeding outside of the greenish area? Fine. It's an overlay of the surveillance captured. We can live with that somewhat. But the camera being physically in front of that overlay means that camera has been edited into the screenshot. And that's why it's so smudgy around the edges. They tried to blend it with the tablet. Horrible editing. I mean, look at the area of the vehicle's hood. The camera is literally fading away near the bottom. If it were physically a part of the tablet, that would not happen, amongst all the other crap. What the damn Sam Hill? Are you following this madness? A photo, screenshot, snapshot, Whatever method was used to capture the image from surveillance would not result in this visual vomit. It would simply be captured from the monitor or snapshots directly taken from the surveillance system. Just like this image. We just broke this down. I mean, this shouldn't be an issue. That is what anyone in that position would do. Now, it's possible that the authorities are the ones who took that photo of the monitor. The same question applies to them. Why would they not take a photo of the screen displaying the surveillance? Remember, the vehicle is spotted right at that moment on the screen. They're looking at the damn vehicle. Why not just pan your camera to the right and take a screenshot of the goddamn video footage playing? It's, well, to be honest, retarded to not do that. Unless there is a reason why that video footage wasn't captured.
Some have stated they don't know why the screenshot was taken like that. It should be obvious why something is being covered up with that surveillance. Nothing new there, right? They never provided that clear, professional screenshot to the public, whoever took it. Everything else is a bunch of garbage. Yet, that's what we're talking about right now, a bunch of garbage. And this garbage was displayed to the public on purpose. It's hiding something. Some still think it's a Prius. We still believe it's an Elantra. That vehicle does in fact have tinted windows. Now, Kohberger didn't have tinted windows based on his traffic stops. But you want to know which vehicle had tinted windows? That's right, the white Hyundai Elantra crashed and abandoned in Oregon. Yeah, see, that's the same vehicle, in our opinion. And the reason the screenshot is so horrible is because they are hiding the fact that this white Hyundai Elantra is the vehicle spotted in all possible surveillance they claim was Kohberger's vehicle. And of course, that's why no footage of the alleged Kohberger's vehicle has been released. You accuse him of stalking those housemates, then murdering 4 of those housemates. His DNA was so-called discovered in the home, and even claimed he was spotted near the home 12 times prior by some form of surveillance. Well, let's just put the final nails in his coffin and show his vehicle driving into the neighborhood. Well, we can't, because it doesn't exist. What? Did he teleport to the damn house then? It's possible, you know. Remember, this screenshot was released after Moscow PD had already identified a white Hyundai Elantra, which they never disclosed publicly. November 29th was when they identified not only a white Hyundai Elantra, which didn't match any description based on previous information, but it also identified an owner of that vehicle. So tack that on the wall. Don't forget this key information. I'll let you guys continue. Needs a bit of fire. Have at it.
The crashed Elantra in Oregon, on the other hand, didn't have a license plate. We assume the registration was discovered in the glove compartment. You know what? Let's focus on something else here. If you examine where this vehicle was, it appears to have been placed on the sidewalk, right? Since the front was damaged, then the vehicle was hit head-on on the road, right? Which would also mean it had to have been at the intersection. Now, either this vehicle or the other vehicle lost control and strayed onto the opposite lane, or this Elantra was rammed into something. Keep in mind, the damage is head-on-head damage. That is not a sideswipe. It is literally 2 vehicles crashing into each other coming forward. Now, how does this physically happen on the road at the intersection? You're going to see the approaching traffic to the left of you from the opposite direction, right? So how do they both crash into each other? They don't. Again, if this was a sideswipe or a crash from the left or right side at the intersection, then the vehicle would have side panel damage, either on the left or right side. It doesn't. So this means the damage is head-on impact, and that's, well, highly unlikely at that intersection. There's a chance of this happening, like a 1 in 5.7 octillion chance, but still a possibility, such as texting while driving, a major factor in car crashes. But at an intersection, this would mean both drivers approaching the intersection were texting while driving. And I'm just trying to rationalize the crash, just for the sake of it. Because this white Hyundai Elantra was intentionally rammed into something, the vehicle was then pushed onto the sidewalk and abandoned. Where is the other vehicle it crashed with? Oh, it was towed. Well, why wasn't the Elantra towed around the same time frame? There wasn't another vehicle, a job injury crash, where the chick just drove into a barricade. Yep. Now, last year, a group of individuals inspected that vehicle, which for some reason was still there, and they assumed the vehicle was dropped off at that location, which is what more than likely happened. The crash didn't happen at the intersection, so obviously we can't know where exactly the crash happened in Eugene, Oregon. Wherever the vehicle was prior to this location, that's where the so-called crash happened. And since we suggest it's the vehicle used to frame Kohberger with, They just simply crashed it into a barricade somewhere, and it was towed to this specific location. Now that digs into a deeper question. If the vehicle was dropped off at this location from a prior location of the accident, then who exactly drove or dropped the vehicle off here? A towman would not do that. They're taking it to the impound. The local police would also not do that, because they would have it towed to that very impound. So, what gives? Perhaps it was in fact towed there, because if it was discovered in its original location, maybe that would provide more visual evidence that the vehicle was in fact just rammed into something. You know, like a barricade. People would obviously put it together and see a barricade in the distance, or near the vehicle, and come to the same conclusion we have. Yeah, it was intentionally crashed and abandoned. Being the same make and model and colour, yep, that's at the very least a suspect. Examining that video, with no other vehicles driving out at night, it just visually supports the narrative that the vehicle was dropped off there, perhaps around the same late hours in the night. We'll leave a link in the description to that video, might even examine some of the footage to spot something inside the vehicle. A homeless man had apparently been sleeping in the vehicle. Cops were eventually called, and of course the homeless man told the truth. The vehicle was abandoned and he was sleeping in it. And also, the front passenger window was broken, but not the driver's window. The passenger window is to the opposite of traffic, so the homeless man broke that window, as that activity would be blocked on that side from the traffic. Now, Eugene PD stated that they were working on having the vehicle impounded, which obviously means the vehicle hadn't been impounded from its original location before being dropped off at that intersection. Mind you, Eugene PD reported that the vehicle was found at the intersection, which indicated the crash happened at the intersection. But if this were the case, there would have been days during the daytime where this vehicle had been just sitting there crashed, and nobody called to have it towed, even the so-called owner, because it wasn't at that location for days, it was somewhere else. Just breaking down a few things here.
Also, remember, Moscow PD publicly claimed that this vehicle was not linked to the murders. How can they publicly claim this if at this very moment, which was December 17th, they had just obtained the make and model on December 7th, right? I know. We all know they obtained the make and model November 29th. But we have to dissect everything in such a rhetorical manner. Law and Crime had an article about this vehicle. Quote, update, Moscow police released new information at 7:30 p.m. Tuesday about the white Hyundai Elantra found in Eugene, Oregon. Police said the vehicle is registered out of Colorado, and investigators spoke with the female owner. Police said she is not believed to have any relation to any property in Moscow, Idaho, or the ongoing murder investigations. Moscow police asked the public to stop contacting the owner. Briefly, so people were contacting the owner of the vehicle? Did they know who it was? How did they get the personal information of this person if there was no license plate? Better yet, how would Moscow PD know that people were contacting that person? I don't recall that person being publicly identified, like with a photo or address, phone number, etc. I think this was a form of damage control. Because whoever that was, it was not who was actually depicted as being the owner. Anyway, Moscow police are aware of an abandoned white Hyundai Elantra found with no license plates and front-end damage after it was reported to be found on a street corner in Eugene, Oregon. Photos of the abandoned car have been circulating online. A spokesperson for Eugene Police told Law and Crime they are working to impound the vehicle and forwarded the information about the white Hyundai to Moscow Police. Aaron Snell, a public information officer for Moscow Police, told Law and Crime, "We are aware of the vehicle and are investigating it." Eugene Police confirmed a vehicle was found on West 7th Street in Eugene. It is not clear whether this vehicle is the Hyundai being sought by investigators. Moscow is more than 750 miles away from Eugene. Law enforcement has previously said they are combing through information about 22,000 white Hyundai Elantras, unquote. Now, going all the way back to the top of the article, it says on Tuesday. This article was posted on December 20th of 2022. Now, let's see here. Going back to 2022 in the month of December, on a Tuesday within this time frame, either this would be December 1st, the 8th, or the 15th. Keep in mind, on December 15th, Indiana State Police had stopped Koberger on his way to Pennsylvania. The FBI claimed they did not instruct them to stop him, checking if he had injuries, but we all know that's what happened. Even a former FBI director stated they did so. Andrew McCabe stated the FBI used surveillance techniques to track Koberger, which included tracking him throughout his travel from Pullman to Pennsylvania. so we know they were tracking Koberger before December 15th. Now, Moscow PD rules out the white Hyundai Elantra. During a time frame, they had just recently identified see, this is the problem. I can't even rationalize this scenario because they obtained information of a white Hyundai Elantra, an owner of that vehicle, on November 29th. So this analysis doesn't even make sense. But let's give it a try for the sake of the episode. The white Hyundai Elantra crashed and abandoned in Oregon was found when? When is the exact date that vehicle was discovered? Now, apparently the date in which the homeless man was discovered in the vehicle was December 17th. I believe there was a criminal trespassing charge against him because he more than likely was the one who broke the passenger window. But this is apparently when Eugene PD discovered the vehicle, right? But we know this is not when the vehicle was crashed and abandoned due to the location. We can guesstimate that the vehicle had been at a previous location for a few days and then moved to the next location and had been there for a few days. Remember, Eugene PD had no knowledge of this vehicle before a call went out about the homeless man basically using it as his new home. So this could be a week of the vehicle not being reported to Moscow PD. A week from December 17th, when Eugene discovered the vehicle, is right before Koberger was stopped by Indiana State Police on the 15th. What does all this mean? I'm getting there. From the so-called reported date of December 7th, being the date in which a white Hyundai Elantra was identified, the white Hyundai Elantra in Oregon would not even be thought of yet, because it hadn't been crashed and abandoned within this first week of December, we assume. Of course, it's a vehicle driven all the way to Oregon, 800 miles away from the crime scene. Eugene PD are not aggressively searching for a white Hyundai Elantra at this point, and they wouldn't have a reason to think the suspect would be in their town. They watch the news, they're informed about a killer on the loose, but because it's so far from their town, they don't have the same alertness as Moscow PD, and even Pullman PD. What's the point here? Since Moscow PD claimed to not have a make and model of the vehicle until December 7th, Eugene PD definitely wasn't aware of that make and model up until that time frame. And of course, the white Hyundai Elantra is investigated around the December 17th time frame.
I'll say that again a bit differently. The white Hyundai Elantra in Oregon had been driving around before the alleged killer's vehicle was identified, based on reports. Keep this in mind, again, based on the reports from November 13th to December 7th, there was not a white Hyundai Elantra identified. Of course, we know there was on November 29th, but that date exposes the frame. So within the frame, they had to disguise that within the investigation. I say disguise because there were reports that Moscow PD had been notified about a white Hyundai Elantra by WSU campus police on November 29th. But it was hidden within articles on mainstream media websites, not the mainstream media reporting it in their news segments. The reason for this is because if they reported that Moscow PD had identified a white Hyundai Elantra on November 29th, then you would have to also backtrack as to how did they identify the make and model of the vehicle to even search for this vehicle in Pullman. And then that would open up even more cans of maggots, because at that time there was no match of Koberger with the DNA found on the knife sheath. So they had to drag the frame out to align with DNA identifying a suspect who was Koberger. We are not fucking around here. We just broke all of that down in the previous episodes. Once the identity of the vehicle was publicly revealed, then the white Hyundai Elantra in Oregon was found crashed and abandoned. I would say soon after the public release of the vehicle's identity on December 7th, that white Hyundai Elantra was soon crashed and abandoned, which was discovered on the 17th, but it was more than likely crashed and abandoned a week prior, closer to the announcement. But then again, there is a possibility that this vehicle had already been crashed and abandoned prior to that so-called December 7th public notice. That's interesting, isn't it? Since the Hyundai Elantra in Oregon was the vehicle used to frame Koberger, Batman had given WSU campus police his specific vehicle on November 29th as they pretended to be the private driver just, fighting crime and bagging bad guys. WSU campus police obtain this information and they also pretend to search for a white Hyundai Elantra. They spot one, of course, being Koberger's vehicle in his apartment complex. Then Batman does what he does best, submits a list of white Hyundai Elantras in the Pullman area, but this would be so-called publicly done, as opposed to covertly giving WSU campus police a specific white Hyundai Elantra. Now, while all of this is happening, the white Hyundai Elantra used to frame Kohberger was already being dumped off in Oregon. This would be around the November 29th to December 7th timeframe. Because the focus was on Moscow nationally, that vehicle was flying under the radar until it was discovered on December 17th. But again, it was discovered on the 17th, but it was already in Oregon, somewhere crashed and abandoned prior to that date. Don't forget, Moscow PD had also obtained this specific white Hyundai Elantra on November 29th from WSU Campus Police. It is Batman who is the source of identifying the make and model, not the authorities. Remember, they had received thousands of tips from the public. This would vary from speculations, some relative information, of course, but the main thing would be a specific make and model of a vehicle that hadn't been identified yet. Moscow PD then publicly reports they are searching for a white Hyundai Elantra with no video footage that had identified the vehicle. So how did they identify the vehicle? Batman. Oh yes, I told you he was everywhere. Remember? Batman submitted a list of white Hyundai Elantras on December 7th, and that's how they identified the vehicle. Nope, I know what your brain is reverting back to thinking. Batman didn't submit a list of white Hyundai Elantras based on what Moscow PD had identified as the alleged suspect, because they didn't have a make and model yet. Let's keep your brain focused, even though it may be hard to keep track of the fuckery. Moscow PD claimed to review surveillance near the home and never reported that they identified a white Hyundai Elantra as the vehicle. It was described as a light-colored vehicle. Of course, later on the reports have a white Hyundai Elantra, quote, seen near the victim's home. But the initial reports do not have a specific make and model. So where did they identify the vehicle if not by the same surveillance they viewed near the home? Batman, he gave them Kohberger's white Hyundai Elantra. Moscow PD somehow just identified the make and model without providing any video source of that identity. And then you had the gas station surveillance, stock photos of the vehicle, and of course the rest was just a bunch of garbage, with the FBI starting to take over the investigation. If it seems we're going in circles, well, we are. We're circling around the frame, continuing to tack elements of it onto the wall. A white vehicle with tinted windows is spotted in the gas station surveillance. A white Hyundai Elantra crashed and abandoned in Oregon also has tinted windows. A white vehicle is spotted on White Avenue traveling from an intersection of Blaine and White Avenue where Taco Bell was located. The so-called private driver claimed to head to Taco Bell after dropping the girls off, then headed home. A so-called private driver claimed they stayed in Pullman and also submitted license plates of white Hyundai Elantras in the area on December 7th. A white Hyundai Elantra is discovered crashed and abandoned in Oregon on December 17th. This vehicle is ruled out as being a potential suspect, but how can you rule the vehicle out if you haven't asked the owner of the vehicle questions? Oh, see, they never reported that they interviewed her. They basically said they believe she has no property or relevance to Moscow, Idaho. Belief is not confirmation. You believe she has no property or relevance. Doesn't mean she was not involved. And why did they mention property? Is it possible that this female is in fact the wife or ex-wife or employee, whatever relation, to the landlord of the victim's home? Some have presented that information, which would tie her to not only Moscow, but also directly to that home, and she's driving the same fucking make and model of the alleged killer. Something to ponder. Nothing appears concrete here, but if you focus on the deceptive elements within the case, this all becomes very important. Because Moscow PD basically trying to hide the fact that they were notified about a white Hyundai Elantra on November 29th is where you build from. Everything after that date is automatically suspicious. I guess we should look into this female then, hey? The frame has many players involved, all the way in Oregon. Who would have thunk it? Obviously, Moscow PD didn't thunk it. Thunk again. This is the chaos sector.